past due for 60 days or more is $3,032. Pending legal action past due is $10,108. We have fuel inventory of Jet A of $8,896 and 100 low lead of $11,300. That, Mike, is there anything you want to point out in the financial report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just our capital reserves, you'll see later on in an action item, we're due for a reimbursement of about $50,000 from MDOT Aeronautics for some runway repairs, so that'll get added to our capital reserves. The one expense that still needs to come out down the road is actually from the insurance claim from the small electrical fire we had on Building 6162. I've been sitting on that for a long time. We've been looking at a lot of different options on how to rebuild that system. Along the way, we've had one or two potential tenants come in, or future tenants, and we were trying to realize what their electrical needs were if we're going to rebuild the system or do a deal, and those have been kind of coming and falling through. So it's been kind of in limbo for a while, but I want to get that done before winter. That expense I estimate to be around $60,000, but all in all, the capital reserves should be, after all that settles down, about what they are now. So we'll have the influx of cash from MDOT Aeronautics and then the expense of the electrical system. Other than that, budget's tracking along well. Next month is kind of really the month our revenues will start to match our expenditures. We have a lot of the initial expenses I mentioned last meeting. The first couple of months of the year, our bond payment and a lot of the insurance costs are up front.
Questions for Mike on the budget or any comments? Mr. Van Oz.
Mike, on the repairs to that electrical, when Iverson put that in, he was really, really heavy industrial.
Correct.
And are you attempting to restore that back to what it was, or are you just trying to make that serviceable, leaving what's in place?
Correct. So the last time that we had the system that was in the building, the last tenant that needed that much power was Iverson. The last three tenants we've had in there have not needed that power requirement. I am not a fan, nor are any contractors I work with, of rerunning that electrical system on the roof just because of how hot it gets on that steel roof. I'd like to run it inside. That incurs a little bit higher of an expense. We have to put in some more safety features when it's inside the building. My thought is to run it, plumb it for a larger system, but only run one of the three legs in there and a lower use. So we're going to we're not going to rebuild it to the extent that it was when Iverson is in there. We're going to build it to meet what our tenants, the last three tenants, have needed, but have the additional conduits if we need to plumb more in the future. That's my thought on it, at least.
I would think if you're going to restore that, you would restore the demand when you get a tenant that tells you how much power he's going to need, because I think you have a whole lot more power than we'll probably ever use in there.
Right.
Big industrial customer in there. So, all right.
Comments or questions on the July financial report? None, I'll entertain a motion to receive and file. By Mr. Folbaum, supported by Mr. Van Oz. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Carries. Item number 6 is the manager's report. 6A is the new hangar update. Mike?
I want to provide a brief update. I'm sorry I didn't bring a picture with me, but if you guys have driven by, our new hangar has most of the siding up on it. The concrete pad's been poured. The door has been hung. It's, I would say, probably about 70% complete right now. They've started grading the exterior for the apron and approach to the hangar, as well as the parking lot. So coming along pretty quickly. They've had the usual couple hiccups here and there with the builder, but most of them have been squared away. So I think within the next month it should be complete.
And operational?
Operational, yep.
Comments or questions for Mike on the new hangar? Hearing none, we'll move to item number 6B, which is the Free Bridge weight limit. Mike?
I wanted to update the commission. This is something that's not really, I don't believe, is within our control, but just to set in some of the effects on our lower weight limit on the Free Bridge that's owned by Wayne County. Our fuel prices will continue. The last load we had, I was able to split with Monroe, but if we're unable to split loads like that or get that organized, we're going to incur, it's roughly about an 8 or 10 cent premium because we have to haul less gallons, lower weight, but we still have to pay the truck and the transportation costs. So it's costing us about 8 cents a gallon. The one load we ordered without that was 8 cents per gallon increase on our fuel. I'm trying to do everything I can on watching the market and keeping the price down or splitting loads to make us competitive with the market. The other larger concern for me is I had a call last week for a potential tenant in our large facility, building 6162. It was an electronics manufacturer, and we set up an appointment to view the building. On the way down, the broker called me and asked about the bridge because he forgot about it. I told him the weight limits. They called back and canceled just because their trucks were too heavy to run across the Free Bridge and they weren't willing to pay the toll. So it is difficult right now to market building 6162. I mean, we have overhead truck wells and the facilities for trucking, but obviously we have these new weight restrictions. So I think that's going to be a challenge coming up in the future. Obviously, again, I think it's out of our hands, but I at least wanted you to realize a little bit of the struggle that's going on there.
Mike, do you have any idea what that prospective tenant weight?
I don't know. They were a large electronics manufacturer, computer systems, that kind of stuff, but according to them, their trucks were overweight for the 26 tons, and they didn't want to haul or pay to haul across the toll bridge.
Comments, questions for Mike on the Free Bridge weight limit? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 7, which is our action item. 7A is a landscape architectural master plan services. We have a resolution before us that reads, the Groseal Airport Commerce Park Commission hereby recommends to the Groseal Township Board the approval of a landscape architectural master plan contract with Russell Design based on a proposal dated June 25th, 2017, an amount not to exceed $12,500. Or by Mr. Fulboom. Under discussion. Just for everyone's information, Russell Design is the same landscape architect that did the landscape design at Macomb Commons at the corner of Meridian and Macomb. Very nice job in that design, and so he was the only architectural firm, the landscape architectural firm that we talked to. And it's been my desire just about since I've been on this board to try to get the landscaping around here dressed up a little bit, but we had other projects that took precedent and were in much greater need than landscaping, but I think we're at the point now that it's time to start dressing up some of our landscaping. And the idea is that he'll do an overall plan with a number of areas for landscaping that'll be a master plan, and as we have the money, we'll do a section at a time. So it might be a multi-year project before we get everything looking like it's a development that has some continuity to it, and it sort of all blends together. So that was the intent. And as the comments here say, that this is going to be just a master plan with the idea once we get to a specific area that we want to actually have the work done, we would then hire them to do the actual construction drawing. So we have to do a much more detailed plan as it relates to the size and quality of the plant materials or any of the hardscape that we do. So this is just the first step in hiring the landscape architect to get to a finish. None. We've got a motion by Mr. Van Oz, supported by Mr. Fulboom. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 7B is the MDOT Emergency Repair Reimbursement Contract. We have before us a resolution that reads, based upon the recommendation by the Airfield/Commerce Park Manager, the Groseal Airport Commerce Park Commission hereby recommends that the Groseal Township Board execute state contract number 2017-0660, rehabilitate runway 1735, emergency repair number 3, between the Township of Groseal and the Michigan Department of Transportation. by Mr. Van Oz, supported by Mr. Mann. Mike, you want to give a little explanation?
Sure. This is kind of the procedure we've been following with MDOT Aeronautics over the last 3 years for our emergency repairs on runway 1735. Just the way they disperse funding, it normally comes in 2 waves per year. And kind of the nature of their repairs, they've been willing to have us expense it outright, and then as those disbursement periods come around, the state has been budgeting up to $50,000 per year to keep the runway repaired and online. I do think that well is drying up. I think this may be the last year. I have a meeting with them in about another month, and I will update the commission on which direction that goes. But every year we've spent about that $50,000 cap on asphalt patches into that runway in our one taxiway. But again, this $51,000 is the amount that we've already expensed out of our own personal account. This is just the contract. Once we sign it, they'll reimburse us 90% of that. This is a state-local project, so it's a 90-10 split. Our runway project was a state-local fed project, so it would be a 95-5. But they different pots of money, so they keep this at a 90-10. So we're responsible for a little bit more. But that $5,000 fits within our budget for runway maintenance.
Mike, do you see any repairs coming up that might need to be made in the near future?
We just did the one repair on our taxiway, Charlie. If the commission remembers that, was about $6,000. That was completed about a month ago. There's one more area on our taxiway Alpha here, and then maybe one small panel on runway 1735 that we're looking at. We just had our state inspection, which was a surprise inspection last week. We did well on everything, but they did rate the runway 1735 in poor condition. So again, that's something we kind of keep talking about and is moving forward. Discussion with the feds and the state on what the future of that runway is, and that's something we'll definitely have to do a study session or something on in the future. But in terms of repairs, I see maybe another $15,000, $20,000 max of repairs coming up this year. We've spent $6 so far, but this contract's really catching us up from last year.
So you think those repairs are going to have to be made this year then?
Yeah, if the heat keeps up and there's still some moving going around in the pavement, we're watching them. The inspector recommended we get the one on the taxiway here done just because of how high the lip is on it. It's not an emergency, but it's something he said within the next month or two.
Comments or questions on the MDOT emergency repair reimbursement contract? None. We have a motion by Mr. Van Oz, supported by Mr. Manns. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 8 is the subcommittee reports. We have none tonight, so we'll move on to item number 9, which is our discussion items. 9A is the storage growth options. In your packet, you should have a summary that Mike put together with a couple aerial views. And I know after one of our previous meetings, Mr. Rathel took me for a drive to see some of the storage area. And one most specifically is the one that's behind the DPW building, which should be the second page here. And it is an area where some of the groups on Groseal have their storage trailers, and they were parked in an area that the grass and the weeds were rather high. I'd say probably a couple feet, and they had just pulled them in sort of the middle of the lot, and a lot of weeds and grass growing all around. And then there was a second area where there was a lot of mulch stored, and it looked like someone was chopping wood into like fireplace type size pieces of wood. And so both Mr. Rathel and I at different times had talked to Mike about cleaning that up, and maybe what we need to do is establish some storage area for all the service organizations here that have trailers parked back there, and make it look like it's a regular storage lot instead of just parking them in the middle of a weed field. So Mike was going to do a little bit of investigating, and Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
I have a brief discussion item and see if we can get a little more direction on which way to go with this. You can see there the DPW and spoil storage lot. That's where they store stuff they dig up from water main breaks. They have a couple of stone piles that they keep on site there to fill in any gaps or holes on projects that they're doing. The airport storage over there, we have like our 55-gallon drums we use for trash can for events. Some couple pallets of bricks left over from our east side of Hangar 1 project. It's kind of our outdoor storage for stuff we can't fit inside the building. The mulch pile there is an issue, and not to throw the previous manager under the bus, but that was kind of inherited by me. We kind of had a project that we would take in some wood chips from contractors on the island and then give them to the residents for free. Problem is they started stockpiling around the time I took over, and now they've, we had some heat coming off them, but they're pretty much rotted out, and there's some weeds growing up in them. So I think those will have to get hauled off and open up that property a little bit at some point. But the community group storage, there was an area that's cleared back there, and it's kind of by the alpaca farm den. And it's recently become full. I mean, there's a creek or a drainage creek that runs through on the left-hand side of it. There isn't really any more room in there. We have community groups that I'd say half of the trailers were there when I took over at the airport. Some of them are Boy Scout, some are our own. Island Fest committee has a full-size container there now just to store stuff in, because we were storing all the stuff in Hangar 1, and it was getting to be an issue with our photo shoots and video shoots we were doing. So we convinced them to purchase one of those. We let them keep that back there on a stone base. But Boy Scouts, rowing, a couple other community groups, but that area is full. The other challenge with that area, if we wanted to make it a leased area, which I think would be difficult for two reasons. Access is one of them. The DPW locks the storage yard after 5 o'clock. There was a gravel road that went back there that wouldn't take you onto the airport. The problem is now the new hangar we're building is cutting that gravel road off. So after 5 p.m., before 6 a.m. and after 5 p.m., there isn't really access to that site. There isn't really an easy way to make access to that site either, because it kind of goes through the airport storage facility and all that. You might be able to cut an entrance in by the alpaca farm, but again, you still would have to pull through airport property. And there's no containment to the south, so anybody could drive right out onto the airport, which is it's a pretty big safety concern for me. So the question is, I mean, if we want to monetize something like that, I think we need to find a new yard for it, either in the Commerce Park, or we could repurpose one of our lots across the street on Grohl Road, which I included an aerial in on the third sheet there.
Mike, the property that you mentioned that's by the alpaca farm, where there are some storage currently going on, is that our property?
Correct.
And those people are parking that for free?
Correct. They're all, I would say, 501c3 community groups in the area. Boy Scouts, rowing.
Mike, there's a little history on that.
Van Oz?
Several years ago, and this goes back, remember the old trailers that they used to have for haunted houses? They were storing those back there, and then there was a fire, and there was all kinds of problems. But over the years, once that got moved out, 50c3 or charitable organizations such as Boar's Head Festival, Island Fest, which is a township function, needed space. They were utilizing space in our T hangars, and we said, you need to come up with something. So they came up with a shipping trailer, and they put the trailer back there. This was all supposed to be temporary when it all first started. But as you know, as stuff like this goes, temporary is forever until somebody tells them something different. But I have a couple of thoughts on that, because, the reality is that all of these are community-based organizations. We said, well, if you want to pull them back in the weeds, pull them back in the weeds. That area is not visible to anything but plain Staxian. Nobody from the township can even see that area. Mike is right. It would create, if we wanted to make a facility for these groups to store for free or even for rent, then up to this point, it hasn't cost us anything. We've done nothing. If they want to clear the weeds enough to get into their trailers, they clear the weeds. They show up with a lawnmower and mow it. How far we want, because that's just a field area back there. I think it's important just to maintain a communications and an association with the various township groups. All of the things that we do for free for this township pays us back in spades simply because we don't get any complaints. Nobody gives us negative feedback as to the airport. I don't know that by not offering this whether we would get it. I think probably open up an avenue of where somebody could complain about the airport, which I don't want to see at all. I think they're all community-based organizations. They're all free. They all do charitable work. But to go in there and clear all of that out and make unless somebody is really bothered by the fact that that wooded area, then we're having to talk about that whole area back there, that all kinds of woods and overgrowth and that whole area. If we're going to clean it up, then we'd have to clean that whole area up. That's going to be a pretty big undertaking. So I'm not sure it's as big as a problem as some people think it is. I know I don't think it is. I think it serves a very valid purpose, allowing them spaces to park their stuff. But I also realize that the reason this all started was one of the groups didn't have any space to park their stuff for free. So there's always one more group that wants some free space. Now, obviously, it's not going to get too much out of control because it's a pretty small island. We're running out of groups. But we furnished this for some period of time. We will get some kickback if we take that back. But I can understand if we're going to do it, we need to come up with a plan to do it all. Those are just my thoughts.
Anyone else have any? Mr. Mans.
Township would be.
Township.
Sure. And we have talked to before we even allowed the first one in there, which was Boar's Head, we did talk to the insurance company to make sure the township was covered liability-wise for that area. And they said, as long as the township allows it to happen, we're covered. So we probably have less liability there than we have in the other facilities that the township has, because nobody uses it. I mean, they go in there once a year, maybe. With Boar's Head, it's once every 4 years.
Some of the trailers that were over on the airport property, over soccer fields at one
Yeah,
point.
I don't know where they went.
Well, there's one back by the soccer field. It's a container, but that's on recreation land. But I believe one or two of the trailers were from the Iverson days because he was involved in Boy Scouts and worked with the commission on storing some of that as a generosity because he was running both buildings to get the Boy Scouts over there.
Sure.
I think that's how the one or two trailers started.
I mean, let's face it, we own both of those buildings there. I mean, if we want to clean this all up, we got a lot of big concrete there that we can store structures in. But is that the look that you want over there? I'm not sure. That's another
page.
discussion.
I was just going to ask, Mike, would you explain
The second page.
second page?
The second
marina.
page is the two storage lots across the street on the north side of Grow. The one on the left, this was one large lot. We divided it into two. The one on the left is a landscaping company that's local. The one on the right is the Boat Liverly, the Vesquest storage yard. The one we have had, as you can see, there's a lot of boats in the yard on the right. It is a much better use than it used to be. I was explaining that we used to have a concrete contractor in there breaking concrete at 6 a.m, causing a lot of issues with the residents on the north side. So we leased it to the boat storage yard. They were looking for space, and everybody's been pretty happy over there. But we have had some issues in the last week or two with fire marshal. They have, per their lease, they can obviously rent out parking spaces there. I think they've allowed one person to recycle some boats. So there's some cut up fiberglass and like a stack of chairs and things like that. So I'm working through with that tenant. They they're pretty much on a month-to-month lease there. You know, the one thought, if we're looking for more storage that's somewhat hidden, that yard could be utilized. I think it would obviously take a little while to work with them and get that cleaned up. You could rent it by the parking space. But again, if we do, I think there could be more value if we were to split it up like that. There's a couple of logistic headaches are, you know, now we've got to collect rent from 15 or 20 small tenants. Do we want to have a company manage that and we take a cut, or do we want to try to manage that in-house? The second problem I see is creating rules to regulate the appearance of containers, trailers, storage stuff. I don't think that's impossible. I think we just have to do a little bit of research and work with the attorney on the verbiage there. But I have researched and looked at a couple of yards that rent by the space. There's other yards that are, I've talked to one individual I know, pretty profitable. You have to invest a little bit as they pre-buy all of the containers and then rent the containers out, but you have to expense the containers, new or decent used ones, yourself. The other option is, again, you can rent it by the space and allow them to park a trailer or a container there for storage. Just a couple ideas I was throwing around, you know, and if we wanted to move the containers and the trailers from the community groups, if we converted that lot, we could offer them a reduced rate or a free spot, whatever we and the commission seem fit.
I don't have an issue with us providing the space to the service groups. It's just, I think that area right now where it needs to be cleaned up. It looks terrible, I think. I mean, there's weeds 4 feet tall over there, and the trailer's parked in the middle of it, and there's on both sides and in the back, and how they ever access it, I don't know. I just think that that's not something that we as a commission should allow to happen, and we need to clean it up. And whether we clean up that spot or we find another spot, Mike, maybe you and I and John can work on this together and try to come up with a spot that we feel is the right place to put it. I'm not sure that I want it anywhere in our park because we were trying to keep that cleaned up. So we need to find someplace that it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, but it provides space for
Yep. And Mr. Chair, if I may, the reason I included that third page with the picture of the boat lot is that's already an established lot. The issue with, you know, we could do something in our Commerce Park and create a lot, but then we have the expense of a fence and gravel for the yard and setting all that up. Just another expense added to whatever future we want to do with that. So I'm open to ideas. I just wanted to see if the commission had any thoughts or direction on that. But if you want to maybe form like a small...
You know, because part of that area back there is DPS, and they're utilizing it, and their lot doesn't look any better than our lot does. Maybe it's time for a little joint conversation with the DPS, saying, what are we going to do with this whole space back here? Because it's actually being utilized by both facilities. So it might be a time for that conversation, too, rather than us absorb all of that. Maybe we can talk. We can't leave, because they just park all the trucks back there. Anything goes back in there.
Yep.
You got a bunch of, got all kinds of junk back in there. So it might be time to have that conversation with the DPS group and say, listen, we want to clean, because it's airport property, we want to clean this whole area up. How can we make this work with the two of us?
Yep.
And then if you know, you can have storage bins for gravel and stuff. I mean, that look serviceable. I mean, they're all over the place. All communities have them. But they're usually end in, and everything is kept in one place, and it's presentable. It might be the time to do that. I mean, if we're going to do it.
And I'm not opposed to spending money for fencing or anything if there's a revenue stream that'll cover the cost and, you know, be call it a profit center for us. You know, it might cost us a little bit of money to set something up, but it might generate some revenue for us as well. And you could have part of it for the service organizations where you don't charge, but the other part you could charge for.
Yep, that's part of the concern. The gentleman in there is actually so they in their lease can rent out the spaces, and this is where I'm starting to have an issue with it, is if you recall, I don't know if I ever brought this to the commission. I think I talked to Mr. Chairman about it. We had a proposal for an outdoor well, first it was an indoor, then they requested, because they didn't have the funds to do an indoor facility, an outdoor boat recycling business. And I've cut up a boat myself before and seen how much fiberglass flies through the air. It was not something I was in favor of having anywhere near our Commerce Park. I don't know what the regulations are on that, if that's even allowed outside. But it was something we declined. That gentleman, the same gentleman, is in that lot. Looks like he's recycling a couple of boats in there. There are some low spots in the lot also, and the boats are getting moved around. That's kind of why they're a little bit cattywampus, obviously, in the photo. So if it rains heavily, the lot will flood a little. But
This is insane. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no
Oh, and we're going to get
no
stuck with them.
order to that lot.
A lot of those boats were at the marina, Smith's Cut Marina.
Yeah.
yep.
And we put the pressure on them to move there. We made that facility available, and then it just exploded from there. Because they were all parked in front of that house there for a while.
Right. Yeah. That's another problem for another day, but that ain't going away.
Well, Mike, so you're going to get with the leasee on this?
Correct. Yeah, I had the discussion with the gentleman in the lot, and the leasee is a little convoluted because the owner, Mr. Vesquez, passed away 2 years ago, and there's a couple of kids and then the employees that are still in there. So I've reached out to them, but the fire marshal did write a code letter for that too, so that'll help put some pressure on getting it cleaned up. The gentleman doing the recycling did commit to start cleaning it up. I need to go over and look tomorrow to see if there's any progress. That was last week that we had that discussion. So
Can you make sure that you put this on the agenda again for next month and give us an update?
off the top of my head, it's something I can get you a number on.
Pennies though, right?
Minimal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not worth the headache of having to dispose of boats. Yeah.
Anything else on the storage growth options? Then we'll move on to item number 10, which is a chairman's report. I have nothing to report tonight, so we'll go to public comment. There's no public comment tonight, so we will move to item number 12, which is to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Mann, supported by Mr. Fulbaum to adjourn at 7:35. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries.